Stellar Blade has become one of the most controversial games to appear in 2024 so far. On one hand, many feel that the design choice of the main character was completely unnecessary and an abomination to the gaming industry. Others feel it's a big slap in the face to the woke gaming industry and is making a statement in censorship culture. Having finally played Stellar Blade and getting to experience the full game as intended by the developers, the game has nothing to do with either side of the argument at all. Hearing many immediately write off the game as bad just due to the online disputes on what you should or shouldn't wear is really frustrating. Whether you choose to wear the more lewd fashion choices or not, it has zero relevance on the overall plot or gameplay. Just because you wear one outfit over the other, it doesn't change the way any NPCs engage with you or have any effect to the story. Rather than just focus on the internet drama that inevitably always finds its way to games, this video will cover my thoughts on the beautiful world and unique elements of the game that made this one of my most memorable experiences of 2024 so far. Hopefully, this can help many to see the true gem that Stellar Blade is and maybe interest them to give the game a try just like I did. I hope you all enjoyed this dive into the wonderful world of Stellar Blade. We start the game where we're immediately thrown into the middle of a battle. We watch as ships become bombarded by heavy fire from Earth below. During all the chaos and destruction, we see pods fire from one of the main ships just before getting destroyed as well. Once reaching the surface of Earth, this is where we meet our protagonist, Eve, a member of the 7th Airborne Squad whose main mission is to reclaim Earth and eradicate the monstrous species known as the Naytiba, a violent and animalistic race that occupied Earth after humanity evacuated the planet due to years of war long ago. The invasion, however, is a disaster, with Eve being the only survivor of her assault team. While fighting an Alpha Naytiba, she's rescued by a scavenger named Adam. After helping Eve recuperate from the battle, Adam eventually takes her to Zion, the last safe haven for survivors who never made it off Earth, and asks that she helps in saving them. Now, I don't want to give away the entire plot, but this is just to help you get an understanding of the story and world that Stellar Blade takes place in. The base idea for the plot and theme of Stellar Blade is actually really solid. The different plot twists and reveals really kept me engaged for the second half of the game, and honestly I really enjoyed the way the story unfolds. Don't get me wrong though, the story is the game's weakest point and in my opinion is carried heavily by the combat and soundtrack, but more on those later. Stellar Blade's storyline and hidden themes found throughout the game have so much potential, but I do feel that it falls a little short in more areas than one. I did still enjoy the fact that there were hints of emotion and tension in the story though. It didn't feel stagnant, nor did I get to any point where I felt bored or uninterested. Overall, even though the story is shaky at times and certain areas could have been strengthened more, I still think the plot holds together really well and makes for an interesting story. Now I've seen other reviews talk about how lackluster Eve is as a main character. I've heard many say that she's a shallow and dull character with no personality or sense of humor. I feel that these statements don't accurately represent Eve, because as we learn right at the start of the game, she is a soldier who, for her whole life, has been in a safe haven in space known as the Colony, secluded from the world below. It's also fitting seeing as later on in the story, more is explained about her and the upbringing she had while living there. As the player progresses in the story, you see Eve learn about the previous generations of humanity before the abandonment of Earth. She's so disconnected to anything other than life on the colony that adapting to life on the surface is a real struggle. Not only does she have trouble talking with the remaining few survivors she encounters, but even basic things like physical books and rain are foreign to her because of her knowing nothing about the outside world. Although the story missions themselves don't really flesh out Eve's character development, the side missions dive deeper into showcasing her personality and morals. Now I do wish the developers put more effort into projecting Eve's growth in the main story over the side missions, but the fact that they at least tried to some extent to display her as a caring and understanding person still shows the passion behind the making of the game. Even though Eve is disconnected to both the world and people around her, she still goes out of her way to help the survivors on Earth, and in doing so, the player sees both the internal and external struggle she feels as she witnesses the turmoil the survivors have been through for their entire lives. The characters you meet along Eve's journey are another example of how well the designers did with giving each character their own unique visual flair. Being able to see the different types of technology incorporated with each design keeps the interactions interesting. Some characters are more interesting than others, like in all games, but in my opinion, no character truly felt boring or dull to encounter. It was nice being able to see how certain characters occupied their time in a world where hope and happiness are practically a thing of the past. When starting the game, I felt the controls for Stellar Blade were definitely something I'd have to get used to, but after a few attempts on the first tutorial boss, it felt like second nature. After unlocking more abilities in the skill tree, the combat becomes more fluid and, combined with the counter and execution animations, makes for an enjoyable fighting system. I've heard many other people say that Stellar Blade's combat is really similar to Sekiro. I do agree that there are a lot of similarities between the styles, but I wouldn't say that there are many boss fights I ran into that had the same intensity and fast-paced feeling as Sekiro. Instead, battles in Stellar Blade are more slow-paced and rely on attacks given after counters and parries that have a more weighted feel to them. I also enjoyed Stellar Blade's stylistic flair when it came to Eve's special abilities. I wouldn't be surprised if the developers had some inspiration from the Devil May Cry series. Both games make the player feel like they're the main character in an anime when engaging with the combat. The satisfying visuals of doing perfect dodges and parries, accompanied with the well-designed burst and beta system, make for so many different combo routes that all fit well together. This just makes not only boss fights, but even open world combat more exciting. Even the fact that along with Eve's sword, you also have access to a gun, really just adds more variety when choosing how to approach engagements. It allows you to change up your whole fighting style and keeps combat fresh. Areas that only allow gun use make the player strategize about how they approach combat, and think more about enemy placement, as well as ammo control. I was worried at first that ammo would be scarce, like in many cases, but fully restocking on bullets is super easy, and doesn't cost the player too much gold neither. The combat is definitely one of the best elements of the game, and you can see the devs really put a lot of work into it. When it comes to the music for Stellar Blade, I haven't heard a single disappointing song. Not only were the themes for boss battles well composed, but even the open world segments kept me interested in the slower parts of the game, and made emotional scenes even more impactful at times. The care and attention given to the music in Stellar Blade really helps the player get immersed in the beautiful world that the developers produced. With over 100 different songs, each feels just as special as the other, and really emphasizes the raw emotion the game wants to capture. When being sent to the first area of the game, you're immediately hit with a subtle and calm song that, like every game, is just lingering in the background. But once entering combat, the music becomes fast-paced and makes the battle feel more intense. I've recently started to see more games implement this kind of approach to background music, and honestly hope other games add this feature as well. For this being the first song that the player encounters, it's a great introduction to what's in store for the game's future OSTs. While researching for this video, I found out that Shift Up, the developers for Stellar Blade, collaborated with other sound studios and artists for a good portion of their soundtrack. Even the composer for Nier Automata worked on some of the OSTs for Stellar Blade. You can really hear the influence Nier had on Stellar Blade's music as you traverse the different stages in the game. I recently found out that one of my personal favorite boss fights in the game was actually written by an artist who made music for Final Fantasy XVI. Just like with Elden Ring, I've added so many different songs from Stellar Blade to my playlists, and friends I have that haven't even played the game are looking forward to hearing all of the themes. I'm glad that time and care was put into the music for Stellar Blade, because without it, the game would have lost so much of its world building and immersion by doing so. I'll put some of my personal favorites in the description below for those interested in getting a little preview of the game's beautiful soundtrack. Stellar Blade is a game that I feel is getting talked about for all the wrong reasons. The game has numerous enjoyable aspects to it that make it a standalone experience for me. Of course there are problems with the game, as all games have once you dive deeper into them, but I feel the pros definitely outweigh the cons when it comes to Stellar Blade. Yes, there are parts in the story that feel underdeveloped, and yes, there are parts in the English dub for the game that definitely could have been re-recorded. And yes, I do feel that the main story on its own is very short, but overall the game still stands on its own 2 feet and delivers an experience that has made it one of my top 10 favorite games. There are so many other elements that I could cover about this game that I haven't already. The replayability with New Game Plus is amazing, especially since after completing the game for the first time, not only is there a new difficulty unlocked, but there are multiple endings to the game as well. The countless outfits you can get in both the base game and in New Game Plus are all great. Even having the ability to combine different hairstyles for Eve is just a nice way to style her in whatever way you want. I love the different variety of enemy types and all their unique designs and movesets. Even though the boss fights themselves weren't really that difficult in the normal mode, each fight still was enjoyable and definitely kept me invested. From the different phases to the boss arenas themselves, I truly enjoyed every part of the combat. even the fishing minigame is a fun and calming way for the player to chill out for a while and enjoy the beautiful world they're playing in. I found myself at 1 to 2 AM just relaxing, either fishing or just listening to the theme for the main fishing area. Now, I would have been a little more critical on weaker aspects of the game, but the fact that the team that worked on Stellar Blade is known only for mobile games made my expectations a bit more reasonable. For this being their first debut non-mobile game, this is actually really impressive. Plus, just like games such as Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, there are no microtransactions, and once you buy the game, you have access to everything. This just goes to show the fact that even mobile game developers understand that microtransactions aren't needed to still make a profit. I want to give a big thanks to everyone who stayed till the end of this video. My original plan was to make a video on how Dragon's Dogma 2 would be my personal Game of the Year for 2024 a few months back. But honestly, once I bought Stellar Blade, it actually surpassed the expectations I originally had and definitely dethroned Dragon's Dogma. Just from things I've brought up in this video, Stellar Blade has made a huge impact in my experience with it, and I just had to make this video. I really wanted to get this out before the Elden Ring DLC releases, because I know once it drops on the 21st, I'm going to try my best to make a video on it as well. I hope the quality of this video is okay as well. This is my first time with new editing software, and I'm still trying to get the hang of everything. Making this video was so much fun, and I can't wait to make even more projects to share with you all in the future. Till then, however, thank you all for watching, and Mother's Fear be with you.